The agenda this week analyzed the Ford government's direction on the energy file, heard a stinging critique from American writer Chris Hedges on the state of his country, and debated new directions in Canadian foreign policy. The agenda's Week in Review begins looking at Ontario's new approaches to poverty reduction.
Why can't we just sort of figure out what this is supposed to be all about?
Well, to me, that's one of the reasons the basic income was brought in as a pilot program, to get that research, to get that data. It's not simply nice to have. Literally, people's lives are depending on how we administer and roll out the most effective social programs possible. And, you know, I have to go back to the issue of cost, Steve, since you brought it up. I mean, these days we seem to be caught in this very narrow, one-sided estimate of costs or examination of costs, financial cost only. Due diligence requires that we do a cost-benefit analysis, right? That's how we make decisions on a rational basis.
Spend more on basic income, but realize savings in healthcare, environment.
Well, we hear about this price tag, but what about the benefits? You know, what about the fact that under the Manitoba study, emergency room visits went down 8%. If you use the extrapolation to the Ontario healthcare budget, that's almost $4.5 billion in savings, the cost of ODSP alone. So when you look at both sides of the equation and take into the benefits, we're paying for it now too, Steve. I mean, last numbers I saw, $35 billion a year costing the system in things like law enforcement costs, healthcare costs, those things that we're paying right now.
Okay, let me get Ginny.
Taxpayer households.
Let me get Ginny.
Look, John Malloy makes a good point, and I think we should get into that. I think we need to also start to decouple the different things that social assistance is meant to do, because it's a few things. It's the compassionate desire that I think we all agree with, that a society must take care of those among us who cannot take care of themselves. It's also, I think, a deeply compassionate view that anyone who is able to do work, and that, by the way, that includes a lot of people who have what we call traditional disabilities, anyone who is able to work should be given the best possible opportunity to do so, not even necessarily for the income, but also because of the sort of self-fulfillment that brings.
Let me get Lorraine back on this. Lorraine, do people who work in the social services sector, and I'm, you know, for lack of a better expression, going to put you there, does everybody, is there consensus on what social assistance is supposed to be about?
Yeah, I think that our experience in speaking with people who rely on this assistance, it is, I think the attitude is we are trying to be compassionate and help you, but all of the rules and regulations really counter that philosophy. And there is just not enough resources that actually help lift people. It actually works against them. It keeps them in poverty. I agree with the other panelists that poverty is very complex. It, if you're trying to help people get into the workforce, a single mom, and they don't have transportation, they don't have a safe home, they don't have public transportation that can get them to the job. I mean, these are all barriers that are preventing people from moving forward. So we can talk about the cost of giving families a basic income, but we should also be looking at what would it cost to actually, like we have a dire lack of affordable housing in all of our communities pretty much in this province. What's cost to actually provide those supports for people? I mean, it's all connected.
Mike, you're suing the government.
Yes.
You're not only opposed, you're going to court.
Right.
What are you doing?
Well, we've tried everything else and take no joy in this, but when governments go astray and make these kinds of decisions, then that's what the courts are there for ultimately, to provide justice, and we'll be seeking that through the legal system.
What's the gist of the lawsuit?
Sure. Well, there's a class action that's been commenced with 4 representative plaintiffs from Lindsay, 4 recipients, who...
Lindsay was one of the pilot project areas.
That's right. You were up in Lindsay, and we talked about that at the time.
There. Yeah.
That's right.
Hamilton, Lindsay, and Thunder Bay, I guess, was the 3rd.
Right. And so this class action is essentially asserting that there was an agreement. There was an agreement on this research study. The fact that it was a 3-year research study, and it gets into, we talked about this before the show. You can agree with basic income or not. What's happened now is really about how this government, any government, treats people, right? And so just being, having the program being taken away the way it was midterm, that's what our class action is going to be based on. We also have an application for judicial review coming up on the decision itself.
So, Neil, you are not here as a politician or as a lawyer, and notwithstanding that, I'm going to ask you a political legal question, which is, do you find it problematic that after promising during the election campaign that the government wouldn't cancel this basic income pilot, that it would let it run its course, that they in fact came in, did cancel it, and now have no plans at the moment to replace it?
That is both a political and a legal
there you
question.
Go.
So I mean, I think from my perspective, just as a policy observer, that has some challenges. If I'm somebody who was under the expectation that I would have this runway to do things, and whether that's go back to school or make changes in my in how I live my life, I think it's reasonable to assume that essentially a contract was entered into with the government.
How much of what you're describing here is a feature of the person who happens to sit in the Oval Office today versus if anybody else were in that chair?
I think Trump is the symptom, not the disease. He's a con artist, he's a demagogue, and he was astute enough to tap into the zeitgeist. The tragedy for me, you know, there were insurgencies in both of the major political parties, Bernie Sanders and the Democrats. And the Democratic Party establishment was just more astute in terms of blocking the nomination to Sanders. And I would argue that they effectively blocked it. The Republican Party establishment was not able to block Trump. And if Sanders had gotten the nomination, I think he would have beaten Trump.
How would America be different if that had happened?
Not terribly, because with a Republican-controlled Congress, it would have been paralysis. But you wouldn't have Sanders pushing forth the kinds of agendas, nor making the kinds of appointments to the EPA, to education,
Supreme Court
that that Trump has made, and that for me is quite frightening. And I think we have to pin some of the blame on the Clinton campaign. When you go back and read the Podesta emails, they pushed Trump as a candidate because they thought he would be the easiest candidate to defeat. So both Sanders and Trump responded to the reality of the grotesque social inequality in the United States, which is greater than the Gilded Age, greater than it was a century ago. The difference being that, of course, Trump is dishonest. I mean, Trump has only fueled the kleptocracy.
Well, let me pick up on that, and you mentioned a bunch of important institutions in American society in the midst of that answer, and I want to pull a quote from the book here that deals with that. Sheldon, if you would, bring this graphic up. The most ominous danger we face comes from the marginalization and destruction of institutions, including the courts, academia, legislative bodies, cultural organizations, and the press that once ensured that civil discourse was rooted in reality and fact, helped us distinguish lies from truth, and facilitated justice. I saw a poll recently, I bet you saw it too, in which Republicans were surveyed, and 93% said, if Donald Trump says it, I believe it.
Yeah.
I think the same poll showed those same people saying, if someone in my family says it, only 63% of people believed it. They believe the president more than they believe their own family. 80% of Republicans think that what's in the Wall Street Journal is not credible. 80% of Republicans don't believe the Wall Street Journal even. In that America, what hope do empirically provable facts have?
Well, you pinpointed something that's very ominous. When national and political discourse is no longer rooted in verifiable fact, then facts are interchangeable with opinions. Truth is whatever you want it to be. And I write in the book about the nature of the permanent lie, that all politicians lie, all governments lie, as I.F. Stone said. But they lie for expediency. So, for instance, Bill Clinton argues that by passing NAFTA, there will be many more American jobs, good jobs. Bill Clinton doesn't make that argument anymore because it's false, and who knows whether he knew or didn't know, but it's false. With a permanent lie, reality, facts doesn't matter. So Trump wins by a landslide. Trump has the largest inauguration crowd in the history of, it's
first guy to win Wisconsin in 50 years.
It's endless.
Not true.
Right. It's endlessly, but it doesn't matter. And then you have media platforms that, like Fox News, that will propagate or disseminate these lies uncritically. And that has corroded discourse in the United States. The institutions, in a functioning democracy, you have institutions, and you cited them, the courts, academia, the press, that their job is to make sure that people speak about a verifiable reality. Those institutions have become corrupted, weakened, destroyed, or replaced with systems Fox, Breitbart, all of these right-wing propaganda outlets masquerading as news. The court system has been taken over and is now being finished off with appointments from the Federalist Society, which is this ideological right-wing. So, it creates a kind of schizophrenia where you may see reality in front of you, but reality is denied by the power elites and by the organs, the media platforms that disseminate the opinions of the power elites. And that really begins to sound like descriptions of totalitarianism someone like Hannah Arendt would write about.
I started my Axe to Carbon Tax campaign over a year ago, and I always said the national conversation depends a lot on the position the PC party was going to have, and lo and behold, the PC leader is now the premier in Doug Ford. And cap and trade did one thing really, really well, and that was drive up the revenue for government, the government of Ontario. That's what it did really, really well. It also funneled a bunch of money down to California, but the initial revenues it was going to raise was $1.9 billion. And I call it a racket because it wasn't going to do what it was sold on doing. And it was misrepresented to taxpayers. And I'm glad to see it go with the first priority of the government.
Sarah, what was your view on it?
We have a climate problem. Forest fires in BC, flooding in Toronto. It's expensive. There is no golden goose to solve climate change that is going to be extremely popular with everybody and cost $0. We have to stop pretending that's what it is. So what I'm interested to know is for those who are against a cap and trade program or against carbon pricing, which is found to be the most economically efficient way of reducing pollution, what would you do instead and how much does it cost?
Hold off on that reply because we're going to get to that. We're going to come to that later.
Looking forward to it.
Ken, let me get to you. Your view on cap and trade is and or was what?
Sure. I've never been a fan of cap and trade. It's a mechanism that has certain applicability to some pollutants, but it's not well suited for greenhouse gas controls. It is also fundamentally stealthy. It is essentially a carbon tax, but it's implemented in a way that consumers don't get to see the tax bill directly. They just see higher cost goods and services. And it's also rife with cronyism because various industries will threaten to leave if they don't get free carbon credits, and the carbon credits are allocated politically rather than, generally speaking, being fully auctioned. And so I've just, because sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide both end in dioxide, doesn't really mean that cap and trade is applicable to both pollutants, and I don't think it is for carbon dioxide. I also don't think a carbon tax is useful for carbon dioxide because it's not going to be global, which means if you raise the tax here, the carbon emissions will just leak elsewhere.
Let me pick up on that because, in fact, Tom, I'll put this poll to you. Ipsos conducted a survey of Ontarians, and apparently 68% surveyed said that they agreed with the following statement. Carbon taxes are a pointless, symbolic gesture that will cost Ontarians a lot of money and do little for the world's climate. Was that a problem for those of you on your side of the argument trying to advance this?
I think you can differentiate the idea of putting a price on carbon and raising taxes, right? So I think the mistake the Ontario government made, the Liberals made, was not in having their initial policy revenue neutral. If it's revenue neutral, like BC's carbon tax, you can't accuse it of a big government. You can't accuse it of raising taxes, and those arguments are gone.
Revenue neutral meaning whatever they take in, we give back in tax cuts or whatever?
That's right. So if I raise money in carbon taxes, I reduce sales taxes or payroll taxes to sort of make it equal. So I'm not getting any net revenue. It makes it very robust come the next election because you can't run on a platform to raise the taxes that you've reduced for the carbon tax. So I agree, if you want a robust, politically neutral solution that's economically viable and efficient, you make it a revenue neutral carbon tax. Now, Glenn Murray was a carbon hawk, and he decided to double down on climate action. I agree. I think we are in an emergency. I think it is time to double down. But I think it's a mistake not to come out of the gate with a policy that is much more politically robust and make it revenue neutral.
Let me put that revenue neutrality idea to Jim. If the carbon tax, now you first opposed it when Patrick Brown was the leader of the PC party, and it was part of the PC party platform.
Right.
And I think his was supposed to be revenue neutral. So the revenue neutrality aspect of it still didn't make it popular with you, is that right?
Not only unpopular with me, but as you said, the Ontario population. There's no such thing as a revenue neutral tax. There are winners and there are losers. It's the equivalent of saying you're going to the store for a sale and there's a 50% discount, and you make your purchase and the person behind you in line is getting the 50%. There's no such thing as revenue neutral. At least the NDP government in BC has now admitted they're giving up this myth that the carbon tax is revenue neutral there. And so I think it's a misnomer to suggest that there's such thing as a revenue neutral carbon tax.
If you take $2 billion in taxes in from a carbon tax and you cut people's taxes by $2 billion, how is that not revenue neutral?
Because the individual who's paying the tax, $1,000 a year at some estimates, is not going to get $1,000 back at the end of the year. And so it's giving the impression to the taxpayer that if they pay this tax, at the end of the year, they're going to see some sort of a refund or a rebate that's going to make up for the increased tax that they are paying. And I think that's misleading to the individual taxpayer that you're trying to sell this program to. And in BC, we've seen that those tax credits or the return of that tax money goes into industries, specific industries that the government is favoring. For example, to movie stars and the film industry to make up for it. So the idea that there is a revenue neutral carbon tax has been proven to be false.
Let me get Sarah on that. Do you agree with that?
I disagree. I disagree. I think, we spend a lot of time in Ontario saying, well, what about for the people that can't afford gasoline? What about people that can't afford to pay more on their home heating bills? You can come up with a series of programs. You can design a system in such a way to help those people. Yes, you can cut some money off of income taxes, and you can come up with a whole bunch of programs designed to help people lower their energy bills. So there's lots of different ways that you can support different Ontarians at different levels who need it across the economy through carbon pricing, and you can reduce emissions at the same time. It's cheaper than doing it through regulation, which also comes with pitfalls for industry and for business. So I fundamentally don't understand why we're against helping people save money.
Twitter diplomacy is a disaster. It's just a disaster for everybody who does it, starting with Donald Trump right on down. Foreign ministers, we all know, pick up the phone and call their counterparts and say, this is an important issue to us. We really care. There is a Canadian connection here. This is, riling up our public opinion.
Well,
and we find ways.
Let me put this to Gary. There was apparently a headline in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz recently that proclaimed Canada, quote, the loneliest country in the world.
Wow.
What does the lack of support...
Over the top.
Well, okay, but it's there. What does the lack of support from other Western countries in the face of the Saudi reaction say about our standing in the world right now?
Well, I agree with Janice that was a bit of an overstep by Haaretz in reaction. But, I think what shocked Canadians to some extent was the fact that the United States basically said publicly, well, you two folks, you sort it out amongst yourselves. And when it came time to, with the UK, would they support us? It was like, sorry, nobody's home. So I think that actually surprised Canadian public opinion that what we consider to be our friends and allies were less than forthcoming in their support. To Janice's point and to your point on the tweet, it was interesting because Chrystia Freeland's tweets didn't seem to be the ones that actually set the Saudis off. It was the tweet in Arabic from the actual embassy,
Right.
which seems to have actually using the words immediate release.
They shouldn't have done that either, Gary.
But I mean, this is the world we're in.
Yeah.
I will disagree. Twitter diplomacy is a reality of the world that we're in. Yes, foreign ministers have to be able to pick up the phone. Yes, diplomats have to talk to one another. But going back even to like early 2010, 2011, reaching out from missions it's an important way to connect with people. The reality in the world, in the age of Trump, is when issuing a tweet used to be the least possible thing you could do in a foreign ministry to express concern or support, Trump has blown that up in the terms of he uses it for all sorts of statements, making public pronouncements, and as a result, Twitter has now received that stamp of authenticity and authority. Yeah. And that's the reality we're in.
Let me read this from David Mulrooney, and Roland, I'll get you to comment on it first. He, of course, our former ambassador to China. We're generating the perception, he writes, among emerging powers that when we talk about human rights, we're arrogantly insisting on the adoption of an agenda that reflects the worldview and biases of the secular West. Among our Western allies, we're increasingly seen as dilettantes, promoting our values agenda because we have no real interests to pursue. Roland, is he right about the limits of trying to spread Canadian values far and wide?
Well, I think it's a bit harsh, but he's on to something, and it's a feature and has been a feature of Canadian diplomacy for decades and cutting across different governments. I think it's a bit harsh, though, with regard to this particular case. I think that Besma is right that, you know, I think that the tweet could have been phrased differently, but the essence of it wasn't remarkable. What was remarkable was the reaction. And I think the lesson in all of this is, the big lesson isn't really about Twitter diplomacy. You know, political leaders have to be very careful in what they say, no matter what the medium. Mm-hmm. The big lesson is that in the absence of the United States as a leader on human rights, that authoritarian governments will feel increasingly emboldened to be attacking Western governments that are speaking out for these values. And, you know, we were alone there. Not very many countries came to Germany's defense when it received similar kind of treatment. I think what this means is that countries like Canada and Germany and Sweden need to come together and talk about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable so that they'll be prepared to stand with each other should this kind of incident happen again.
Well, these words were spoken by Canada's Prime Minister at the United Nations 2 years ago. He said, "We are Canada and we are here to help." Would these words sound believable in 2018, or would anybody care to hear them in 2018?
You know, I think they're less believable because we are at a moment when the world around us is changing. And so even if you follow Roland's suggestion that Canada, Sweden, and Germany get together to decide what's acceptable, first of all, who elected them to decide what's acceptable? Even for the West, there's some very obvious omissions there. But beyond that, when you put three people in the room to decide what's acceptable, you're going down to the lowest common denominator amongst those three. So the force and the vigor with which human rights were defended by the United States and by Canada, once you remove the United States from the equation and you have a government in Britain that is totally paralyzed and navel-gazing and self-preoccupied, you don't have the same opportunity to press this case. So what does that mean for us, Steve? Really what it means is we have to be much more careful, think through much more carefully before we tweet. And that's the real trouble with Twitter, that you can do it so quickly. And we have to concert a strategy. We have to decide where we can make a difference. I can tell you, Badawi's situation today is not helped by that tweet. It's worse because it was made an object of controversy. We've had a history.
This is the person in captivity in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, Gary knows these stories very well. We have had Canadians jailed in Saudi Arabia, and they were released as a result of intensive private conversations by the foreign minister, by the prime minister, and the more they faded into the background, that increased their chance that they would actually be released from jail.
That is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, September 14th, 2018. You can see all of those conversations in full at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.